Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ron, and today we are going to be doing a Plants vs. Zombies tier list. I did this recently, but that was more of a meme tier list because that was a sunless run, which we completed on the channel, and we just recently completed our mushroom only challenge, going through every board on New Game Plus so that we could actually use the coffee bean and use the mushrooms on every board, which made me appreciate certain mushrooms much more than others. And as you can see, we have an interesting category at the bottom called Situational. These are plants that are situationally good, or they're utility-based plants. So anything that has one of those functions or only really functions for that purpose is going to go down in the situational. First up, we have the pea shooter. The pea shooter is the very first plant that you get, and it's a pretty solid plant overall. It does decent damage, it recharges pretty quick, it costs 100 sun. Even on the sunless run, this one actually proved to be pretty good. I'd put this one up into B tier because for the full first level or first stage, it's pretty solid. And same goes with stage 3. Stage 2, 4, and 5, not so much. The roof isn't great to be putting pea shooters on. It's not terrible, but it's not great. You're not going to be putting these up first. Same goes with the night maps. It's not bad because it's only 100, so sun is pretty manageable at that point to get 100. So it's still usable even on those maps. Then we have the sunflower. Sunflower produces sun, and it is very useful to the game. It does make the game a whole lot easier than trying to run through the game without any sun, or trying to force sunshrooms to be your only source of sun, at least during the day. I'm going to put the sunflower in situational because it is situationally good. I guess it's good on every sort of map. It's objectively probably one of the best, if not the best, plant in the entire game because it just gives you value, and you kind of need that value to be putting out other things, or at least it certainly helps if you have that value to be putting out certain things. Then we've got the cherry bomb. Cherry bomb costs 150, does an explosion, deals a lot of damage, can kill big things, can kill pretty much everything in the game. Short of the giant guys, the cherry bomb will kill just about everything, which is pretty useful. 150 is not too much, although I wouldn't really recommend taking night maps. And depending on what you want, it can potentially get outclassed by other plants. So I think I'm going to put this one in B tier along with the pea shooter. Walnut is a very solid plant, I would say, because he only costs 50. He has a longer recharge time though. He doesn't recharge very quickly, which I would say bumps him down a little bit in the ratings. If he had a fast charge up like the pea shooter, I think he'd be higher, but still for 50 sun and for a wall, he's pretty good. I'd put him also into B tier. Then we've got the potato mine. Potato mine also has somewhat of a long charge time. It's not that bad because you're likely not putting out a whole lot of potato mines. You're probably using this for high value targets. You're blowing up the cone heads early. You're blowing up just straggling zombies early if you want to get the most amount of value that you can to be placing bigger plants. And he only costs 25. He does take time to set up though, so he can be a little bit awkward at times. But overall, a very, very solid plant, and I pretty much ran the potato mine even when I was doing a sunless run the entire time, and found that he was very useful. Even if it's just for picking off the first or second zombie, whatever it might be, or just, having a guaranteed kill in a lane, he's really good. I think I'd put him up into S tier. Then we've got the Ice Pea. The Ice Pea costs 175, which is kind of expensive. Recharge time is a little bit slow, but at 175 it's pretty reasonable because you're likely not going to be getting that much sun that quickly. It's basically the same as a regular pea shooter, but anything hit by the ice is slowed down, assuming it doesn't have a shield. Like the screen door zombies, they're kind of immune to this, but everything else, it slows down, and that is really useful. That does make it so you can kill things a little bit easier. You're probably not going to be putting a lot of these down. There's really no reason to be putting more than one column of snow peas down unless you just have excess of them in the mini games. But aside from that, they're basically just a pea shooter that's overpriced if you have multiple in that same lane. So I would say A tier if you have them all placed in just one lane. Then we've got Chomper, and Chomper is probably our first D tier plant. Chomper is just not that great. He costs 150. He has a pretty slow recharge time to actually place another Chomper down. Plus, whenever he kills something, he just kind of sits there and he has to chew up his food until he's actually eaten it. That takes a lot of extra time. So just having a Chomper is probably not going to eat more than 3 zombies throughout the entire match. And that's for each one of them. Plus, once they are chewing, they're just completely exposed. So any zombie can just walk up and eat them. It's best to put them behind something like a walnut, but that's kind of a lot of investment to just have a insta-kill thing when you could just take cherry bomb and blow up multiple with that for the same price too. And I think the cherry bomb even comes back faster, so you could use it more often. I could be wrong about that though. So Chomper is just not way great. Then we've got the repeater. The repeater is decent. He costs 200 sun. He shoots out 2 peas, so he's just 2 pea shooter stacked on top of one. However, that's not always necessary. In a lot of maps, you don't really need to have these on there unless you are just finding that you're running out of space. So on longer maps, he's a whole lot better. On the shorter maps, he's not really that great. You're probably just going to put down like one row of them, and that's about it. You could do about the same with the pea shooters, and you wouldn't really notice that much difference. The main catch to that, though, is that if the repeater dies, that's a whole lot worse than just losing out on one pea shooter where the other one might still be able to live. So I'm going to put the repeater probably into C tier. His cost is just a little bit too high. I like taking him on like stage 3 where you have longer maps in general. He is pretty good there. And then we've got the absolute powerhouse that is the Puff Shroom. Puff Shroom goes right up into S tier. He's probably the best or one of the best plants in the entire game. He costs 0, which is a big reason why he's one of the best in the entire game. He's got an extremely fast recharge time. You can place these down very quickly. They're great for just using as placeholders. You can use them during the day maps too if you wish to use them as shields. That's what I used them for on both the Mushroom run and on the Sunless run. It was very valuable to have these little guys. They are basically a pea shooter with limited range. They can't shoot very far. I think it's 3 spaces in front of them. Even that is still quite useful. So just having this little guy there with essentially infinite value that you can just keep spamming out, you can beat all of the night maps pretty much just with him. Well, maybe not consistently because you have stage 4 where you just have to get great RNG then if you want that. Otherwise, you're going to need something else like the cactuses and stuff. Up next, we got Sunshroom. I'm going to put this in situational, same with the Sunflower. He gives you value, which is pretty useful. He grows to be the same value as a full-size Sunflower. He costs 25, but he doesn't produce as much sun right away until he grows big, and then he starts producing just as much sun. So I would say on par with the Sunflower, assuming you're not using these at night, or assuming you're using these at night, not during the day. Otherwise, that takes a while longer because then you need the coffee bean, and at that point, it's not really worth it, but that's what we had to do on our Mushroom run, and it made it very interesting. Fume Shroom. Fume Shroom's really good. This one only costs 75, and I'm going to put this one high up into A tier. This one deals really decent damage. Not super high damage, but it does have piercing damage. So it hits everything in the line that it's firing. It has, I think, 4 tiles worth of reach. So pretty good if you want to put it at the front. Works kind of like a shotgun or a flamethrower style of defender. And it's great for taking out just about everything because it ignores things like shields and ladders. So very useful. Then we've got the Gravebuster, another situational plant. This one's only really useful on stage 2 because that's the only time that you're getting graves and whenever you would use this. It's great for clearing up graves. It does only cost 75 and it gets you extra money, which is pretty nice. So it has nothing but value there. It's just, it's not a high value plant to be taking for any real reason other than you just want extra money. Then we've got the Hypno Shroom. Hypno Shroom can be pretty good. It depends on what you're hypnotizing, because if you hypnotize a football zombie, a dancing zombie, a bucket head, even a screen door zombie is pretty good. But then if you're hypnotizing just standard zombies, zombies that have been greatly injured, it's not really that great. It does only cost 75, and I would say that this one also is somewhat situationally good, but I think I should put it in an actual tier. I'm going to put it into C tier. I think it's okay. I think it's pretty decent overall, but it's not really the best for taking out stuff, and it can be potentially underwhelming, especially if the zombie that you took over is either not that great or was already heavily injured and gets killed right away. Up next, we got the Scaredy Shroom. This only costs 25, which is really cheap since it's essentially a pea shooter as well. So that's pretty great. It has just as long a range. However, if something gets within 1 tile of it in any direction, it becomes scared, and then it becomes pretty much a useless plant. It's just there as a body. It can't really do much. During the nights, it's pretty good, but outside of that, you're not going to use this during the day maps unless, again, you're doing the Mushroom run. So probably B tier along with the pea shooter. I feel like it's pretty equal to that, even though you can spam these out potentially faster than the pea shooters. The pea shooter is more reliable than the Scaredy Shroom. Ice Shrooms. Ice Shrooms are another kind of situationally good plant. They do a little bit of damage when they go off, which is nice. I'd probably put the C tier. I think it's similar to the Hypno Shroom. Costs the same as the Hypno Shroom too, and has about the same cooldown as the Hypno Shroom. Situationally good, very good on like the final boss fight because you're going to be using these to get like the most damage out. Doom Shrooms. Doom Shrooms are similar to Cherry Bombs. They actually cost a little bit less. They cost 125. However, they destroy 1 section of ground. And the explosion, I think, is a little bit larger than the Cherry Bombs. I could be wrong about that. but it feels a little bit larger. Maybe it's just because I've used this more on stage 4 where you have the larger map as opposed to not just using the cherry bomb there. Again, I think it's good. I think it's pretty decent, especially if you're taking out big stuff. So probably like B tier. About the same as the cherry bomb. And then we got the lily pad. Situational. You're only really going to use it when you have water. And even then, you may not even need to use it, but it's never going to be a bad choice. It only costs 25. Not much to say about the lily pad. Squash. Squash, I would say, is another S tier plant. Squash is really good. It only costs 50, and it does massive damage to potentially multiple zombies. They do have to be all on the same tile, but it is really good when you combine it with something like the potato mine, because this one only costs 25, this one costs 50, and you can hold lanes with it in the early game very well. Makes it so you can protect all of your sunflowers as you set them up, or your sunshrooms, whatever it might be, and then you can start building more solid defenses. 3-peater is honestly not that great. It costs 325. It can potentially cover 3 lanes, so it can work on every stage, but it's so much investment for just setting down what would essentially be 3 pea shooters. They would cover all 3 lanes just fine. I don't really see the appeal of going with this one, so this one's probably like low C tier. Much lower than like the repeater is. Tangle Kelp, another really good plant, very useful for any of the water maps, and it's really, really cost effective. It only costs 25, and it insta kills anything that it hits. So you can kill the dolphins, you can kill the snorkelers, and those are going to be like your main 2 things to kill. Potentially the bucket zombies if they come floating through there, or even if you just want to have some extra defenses early on that's really cheap to throw in the pool so you don't forget. Very solid. I'd probably put this up into S tier too, just like these other entry hazard type plants. They're just really good for the cost of them. Jalapeno. Jalapeno is pretty good too. Jalapeno kills, well, it mostly kills anything in a straight line. It also clears up any of the ice, which is pretty good. You can cover a lane in either direction. So if you want to blow up miners, or if you want to blow up the imps, you can. Pretty good, actually. Only 125 too. I would say that the jalapeno is probably like A tier. I find myself using jalapeno more than like cherry bomb, although I would say that they're fairly similar in terms of usefulness, and I do like using them in combination, especially for big things. Spikeweeds. Spikeweeds are pretty good too. They only cost 100, so same as a pea shooter. They do damage as things just walk over the top of them, which is really good if you put it in front of something like a walnut. Makes it so they take extra damage over time, and they can pop tires on the Zambonis, which is pretty good. They will die after that happens, but I would say that that's pretty worth it. They have a fast recharge time too. I would probably put this one like high up into B tier, the same as the pea shooter. I find it potentially even more useful than the pea shooter, so maybe even low A tier. I think that this one's pretty good. Torchwood. Torchwood is potentially good. It's unnecessary in a lot of situations, but it does get you more damage per second out of any of your pea shooters, so you can have your 3-peaters and use it, you can have your repeaters and use it, or your regular pea shooters. You could potentially use the ice peas too, but there's no point in taking both of these, just take one or the other. Decent, but somewhat fragile. He also has the unique ability of being able to light up the fog a little bit, which is kind of useful too. I'd probably put him into C tier though. He's kind of pricey for 175, and he's got a slow recharge time. Tall nuts, I think, are actually worse than walnuts in a lot of ways. I'd probably put these guys into C tier. They cost 125. They are bigger, so pole vaulters can't go over them, and I think they do have more health than walnuts. But I would still rather have walnuts because I can likely build a whole wall of walnuts quicker than I can, like, tall nuts. There's not a whole lot of reason to pick them over the walnuts unless I just want a potentially better wall. And even then, I could take something like pumpkins and just put them over the walnuts. Then we got our sea shrooms. Sea shrooms cost 0 as well, which on, like, a sunless run or a mushroom run, they are really, really good. However, on a standard run, they're kind of meh. They do decent damage. They pretty much work like a puff shroom that's put in the water. However, they're only good on the water maps, pretty much only on the night map, because otherwise they're asleep during daytime. And they have a really slow recharge time. So, like, I used them quite a bit, but they're not nearly as impressive as, like, the puff shrooms are. Probably, like, B tier on those night maps in the fog. On any other map, like C or D tier, they're Planturn is, like, another situational plant. He's okay, because he does light up the fog, which is nice. You won't really need more than 2 planterns on any given map. They don't cost very much. They only cost 25, but they're not entirely necessary either. You can just spam puff shrooms into the fog where you can't see, and that'll get the job done, and you'll actually have something attacking instead of the plantern. But if you want to take it, it's not terrible. Cactus is probably like another D tier. There's not really a reason to take the cactus outside of having balloon zombies. That's the one purpose that they serve. They cost 125. They're basically like a pea shooter, just worse in pretty much every way, except for the fact that they can rise up and hit the balloons. That's it. Blover is another situationally good or okay plant. It costs 100 to put these out. They blow away the fog. They also blow away all the balloon boys, which is kind of nice. And that's it. That's all they do. So if you don't like the fog, they're not a bad choice. You will have to use them again once the fog comes back, because it will start rolling back in. But you can clear it up, and again, you can clear the balloon boys out. Somewhat of a okay recharge time too. I don't think that they have a super slow one. Then we've got split peas. Split peas are another like C tier plant. They're kind of meh. They're okay. One side of them is a pea shooter. One side of them is a repeater. They cost 125. The repeater is always facing backwards though. And that's only really good against mining zombies and potentially imps. That's about it. Those are the only two zombies that are ever really going to be in the back lines. Maybe the bungee zombies on very specific maps, but even then, they're not fantastic. Starfruit is probably still like S tier. It's really good for what you get. It only costs 125 and it can attack in 5 directions. It's basically as strong as a pea shooter, slightly more expensive, but when you can cover up to potentially 5 ways of attack. Now, yes, one of them is backward, so again, only really useful against like miners and imps. But your other shots, at least 3 of your other shots, are going to be into some other lane where you can potentially be hitting things. You can get a lot of value out of Starfruit, especially for the low price of them. Pumpkin is really good. Pumpkin I'd probably put up into A tier because it's essentially like a walnut, but you can put it around anything. It has a much slower recharge time than walnuts, which is its major downside. It costs 125, same as a tall nut, but again, this doesn't take up a spot like a tall nut. And you could even wrap this around your tall nuts or around your walnuts to have double shields. That's a pretty good option too. And of course, you could put it in the back to potentially protect things like your sunflowers. Magnetrum. Magnetrum is another situational plant. I'd put it down here. It is a pretty good situational plant, though, because it can nullify a lot of big threats. It can nullify the bucket heads, the football zombies, the ladder zombies, the shield zombies, jack-in-the-box zombies. So you got a lot of uses there where it can come in clutch. You can also grab the miner's tools, which is nice, too. So a lot of areas where it works really well. You do need to set these up during the daytime though, which is going to cost you a little bit more because they cost 100 by themselves. They do have a long recharge time, and then you need the coffee bean on top of that, so it'd be 175 in total. But yeah, pretty decent plan in my opinion. Cabbage Bolt is pretty good. They actually do a little bit more damage than the pea shooters do. They're great on the roof, pretty cost effective. They only cost 100. They are fairly solid. I think I'd put this one up into A tier, at least for the roof maps. On all the other maps, I'd probably say they're like B tier. They're probably on par with something like the pea shooter, because then you don't have to worry about the angle. And even though they do a little bit more damage, they do attack a little bit slower than something like the pea shooter, so they'll probably even out in terms of overall damage. Flower pot is situational. It's only really, well, it's mostly good on the roof, just because then you can plant things and you can actually start putting your plants up there. You can use it on regular maps too, just as a shield, which is fine if you just want to have another shield on top of something, so you could put this down and then like a puff shroom in it, and you have essentially 2 things that the zombies have to eat through before they can move on to your other plants. So it has other uses than just that, and it only costs 25, and it has a fast recharge. Corn is probably like S tier. I think it's either high A or low S tier. It's pretty good, even though its damage is just kind of average. It does have its special ability where it can throw a stick of butter, which stuns almost every zombie in the game, which is super useful. And if you happen to get really good RNG with the corn, you can potentially get some really good saves, get extra value out of it. The only thing that this doesn't work on, I think, is like the pogo zombies and maybe the zombonis. I'm not sure if it doesn't work on the zombonis or not. Tell me in the comments below if it doesn't. Just very useful, even on maps where it's not the roof. The corn is pretty good. I probably wouldn't put it up to S tier if it's non-roof maps. I'd probably put it down to A. It's still pretty solid, similar to Cabbage Bolt. But yeah, pretty decent little plan here. Coffee bean, again, another situational one. If you run mushrooms, it's really good. If you don't run mushrooms, it's not good. So that's going to be the determining factor. Cost 75, so it's not too expensive. Garlic is really good. Garlic can be very, very good. I think I'm going to put garlic up into A tier as well. The zombie eats garlic and moves to another lane. You can choke off lanes this way, and it becomes much easier to protect those lanes. That way you can focus on defenses in other areas, especially if you put 2 garlics, because if you put 2 garlics, then basically everything's going to hit it, unless, again, it's like a Zamboni or it's like the big crushing guys, in which case then you're probably just going to throw explosives at them. Umbrella Plant, another like situational one, good on any map that has bungee zombies. Useless on any one that doesn't. Costs 100, knocks away the bungees. It's okay to have like two or three of these set up. Marigold, I guess, is situational too. I could put it into D tier. It costs 50 and it just generates you money. That's it. That's its only purpose. It's great if you need money and you want to rack up money. It's a pretty good plant then. But outside of that, not so good. The melon pulp is really solid too. I'd probably put this one high up into A tier, especially on the roof, maybe even S tier, because even though this one does cost 300, which is a big amount, it does do high damage and it has splash damage. So anything that is hitting it will also hit into 2 other lanes, so you can potentially get even more value out of it. It becomes even better with its upgrade, which we'll talk about in a second. Gatling peas, I'm going to say, are like C tier. They cost quite a bit because you need a repeater down, so 200's on here and then another 250 to put down essentially a second repeater, but in the same spot, so it's more space efficient than having just 2 repeaters. So it's going to be more of like a late survival plant that you're really going to use, and that's it. You're not going to be using the Gatling peas super frequently on regular maps. Twin sunflower, I guess it goes into situational the same with the regular sunflower. It gets you twice the amount of sun every time it produces sun. Costs 150, and you have to put it on top of an existing sunflower, so it costs 200 total, but it will pay for itself. Gloom Shroom is probably like S tier. Gloom Shroom is really good. It deals high amounts of damage per second. It was pretty much the sole reason as to why I could win the mushroom only run, even though it costs an insane amount then, because you, especially on the roof, because then you need a pot, which costs 25, fume shroom that costs 75, another 75 for the coffee bean, and then the gloom shroom on top of it to cover up 3 lanes. But that was the main reason as to why I could win. It's just simply spamming these guys out middle. They're great if you combine them with something like garlic, because then they have to move around the gloom shroom. Gloom shroom hits 3 times in quick succession, and it deals very high damage. It has very short range, so it's not great against every enemy, but against the majority of enemies, it's extremely solid and can clear up waves very quickly just by itself. Cattails are probably another S tier plant. They are really good. They go on top of the lily pads. They cost 225, I believe, and you put this down on top of them, and it can shoot into every lane. It also counts as something that can pop balloon boys, which makes it way more useful than the cactus. Even on night maps, it's still way more useful than cactus because you just need one of these and it'll cover every lane. Pretty much only need a couple of these and they cover every lane and will be able to get through. They also attack twice every time they attack, so essentially having like 2 cactuses for every one of these, it's extremely useful and it's extremely space efficient, so just all around really solid. Ice melons are probably like either A or S tier. I'm not sure. I'll put them into A tier. They are really useful. They cost 200 on top of the 300 from the watermelon, so 500 in total. But now you get ice melons that slow down everything that it hits. Super useful, just like the snow pea is. It's just a really solid effect that you can have on most zombies. Then we've got the gold magnetic shroom. This is just for getting gold. It's very cheap. It doesn't cost that much to throw this on top of the magnet shroom. And this one actually doesn't even count as a shroom. So it works during the daytime too. It's still super situational because it's only if you want money. Otherwise the magnet shrooms are always going to be better if you're just trying to win. Alright, upgraded spikes. Upgraded spikes are awesome. They do, I think, a little bit more damage than the standard spikes, but more importantly than that, they can't be destroyed easy. They can be destroyed if multiple things run over the top of them, like the Zambonis, but I think it takes 3 in order just to break one of these, and they're just all around really solid. They only cost 125 to be put on top of a 100 unit that already has a pretty fast recharge. This one has a slower one, but it's pretty comparable to the amount that it would take for you to put down one of these, put it on top, get another one, put this one down, then put that one on top of it. So probably like A tier. I think that they're a little bit better than just having the regular spikes, and the regular spikes are already pretty good, so yeah, somewhere up in here. They're very solid. And then we've got the big boy, the corn cob cannon. The corn cob cannon is pretty awesome. It's like having doom shrooms that reload themselves and that you can use multiple times. They do take a decent amount of space, and you're not going to really be using these outside of like the survival matches, because there's just not really the time to set one of these up, since you need to put 2 things of corn in front of one another, then put the corn cob cannon on top of it. These cost 100 each, so you have 200 worth of corn, and then you put this on top, which is another 500, I believe. So you're going up to like 700 cost just to essentially have nukes that keep respawning. I honestly kind of find the corn cob cannon more of a meme than really anything that I usually go for, unless again it is on those really long survival maps, in which case sure, it's going to be super fun, and it is very visually interesting, so I'm going to put you up into A tier, corn cob cannon, even though in regular maps you're probably never going to be used. Then we've got the imitator. The imitator is also going to go to S tier because it can mimic any plant, so if you mimic any of these up here, it's going to be super useful. Even if you mimic these other plants down here, or something like a flower pod, it's gonna still be quite useful. So this is where I'd put everything in Plants vs. Zombies after we played through it again. Video coming out very soon about the mushroom only run. That was super fun to do too. Thanks everybody for watching this. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Special thanks to the supporters of this channel. These are my members over here on YouTube, patrons over on Patreon. They get early access to videos like this. And if you would like to see more of my Plants vs. Zombies stuff, be sure to click over here on this playlist right now. Thanks. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.